The most dangerous saboteur doesn't live outside of you. It lives right inside your head, wearing the disguise of thought, cloaked in analysis and perfectly camouflaged under the name I'm thinking. But the truth is, when left untrained, your mind is not your ally. It is a silent betrayer, ready to throw you into chaos with just one misinterpretation, one impulsive reaction, or one moment where you lose control of yourself. It doesn't take a major event, just one offhand comment from someone, a passing criticism, or an unexpected situation, and your mind begins to craft a narrative. It exaggerates emotions, weaves in worries, and pulls you along with hundreds of baseless assumptions. The worst part, you don't even realize you're being manipulated. You think you're reacting logically when in fact you're just a puppet, strung along by emotions you haven't taken time to examine. Think back to the last time something trivial set you off. A misunderstood email, a rude comment from a coworker, someone cutting in front of you in traffic. It took your mind mere seconds to flip the switch to react mode, but hours, or even a full day, to return to calm. And once you were centered again, you probably said to yourself, why did I react like that? It's because you weren't the one driving. The wild mind took the wheel, and you forgot it had done so. An untrained mind is like an unbroken horse. It runs on instinct, reflex, and fear. It can't distinguish between a real threat and a triggered emotion. In ancient times, such instincts helped our ancestors survive wild animals and natural disasters. But today, the threats don't come with claws. They come in words, glances, or someone's silence. And your response, which should be clear-headed, instead becomes self-destructive. It's no coincidence that Stoicism has survived for over 2,000 years. Because it doesn't teach you to avoid life, it teaches you to face it with a trained mind. It doesn't tell you to deny emotions, but to trace them to their roots and choose whether they deserve your reaction. In a world where everyone reacts on impulse, the one who pauses before reacting is the one who holds true power. You might have degrees, positions, and skills, but if you can't master your mind, everything you've built can crumble the moment you lose control. A person who governs their emotions doesn't need to raise their voice, prove themselves, or win every argument, because they understand this. True victory is not letting yourself be dragged into another's chaos. The mind is a tool. It can become either a sword or a shackle, depending on whether you train it or not. Left unchecked, it will judge, worry, doubt, and betray you at the very moment you need steadiness most. It may make you look strong on the outside, but you'll collapse internally over a situation that wasn't even worth it. But when trained, the mind becomes a fortress that protects your inner peace. It helps you hear without absorbing, see without reacting, face situations without being swept away. A calm person is not emotionless. They simply know when silence is power. A person who controls themselves is not anger-free. They just don't let anger make decisions for them. And someone who stays peaceful amid chaos is someone who understands this. The greatest enemy isn't out there. It's the untrained mind within. This isn't just philosophy. It's survival. If you're living in today's modern world filled with negative news, social media conflict, stressful work, and the pressure to succeed, then leaving your mind untrained is like putting a child behind the wheel on a highway. You're going to crash, not because you're weak, but because you weren't prepared to steer. And here's the good news. No one is born mastering their mind, but anyone can learn. Calmness isn't a rare trait reserved for monks. It's a skill you build day by day. Starting with pausing 3 seconds before reacting, with observing your emotions instead of diving into reflex, with asking your mind, are you sure this is true? Every time it starts crafting a story, you can't stop the world from spinning off balance, but you can stand firm. You can't control others, but you can master your own mind. And when you do, everything else begins to shift. Because a steady mind is the foundation for every success, every meaningful relationship, and every wise decision in your life. Tomas wasn't a bad person. He worked hard, held a steady job, had a long-term relationship, and was seen by those around him as a decent man. But beneath that seemingly calm surface lay something silent and compressed. A pressure zone built up from silence, from unspoken words, from endured pains that were never addressed. Tomas was the type to grit his teeth and bear it, to choose silence over conversation, to swallow his hurt in order to keep things normal. He didn't cry, didn't complain, didn't push back, but inside, every word suppressed, every quiet endurance left a slow-burning crack. He didn't get angry at the office. He didn't respond to sarcastic remarks. He didn't complain about working overtime, but each night when he returned home, Tomas became someone else. He snapped at the neighbor's noise, got irritated by a broken oven, lost his temper over a late-arriving letter. One small incident was enough to make him explode. Emotions bottled up for days, weeks, like steam in a pressure cooker, only needed a light tap to erupt into an uncontrollable outburst. The tipping point came on a summer night. His partner, after many days of holding back, finally said one sentence, soft yet piercing, "You're always angry." 4 words, seemingly harmless, but they struck directly at the core of the pressure Tomas had been containing, and like a reflex, he jumped up, shouted, argued, slammed the door, and stormed out. His emotions didn't just overflow, they completely overrode his logic. Tomas walked out of the house, wandered the streets all night, his mind swirling with rage and helpless thoughts. But the most important part wasn't the outburst. It was the final moment, when he stopped at a park bench near dawn, pulled out his phone, aimlessly scrolled through YouTube, and saw a title that, as he later said, changed my entire life. You can't control what happens, but you can control how you respond. That was the first video he ever watched about Stoicism, a foreign concept, an ancient philosophy. But in that moment, it was the only thing that made him pause and listen. And that same night, Tomas didn't sleep. He watched video after video, began reading about Marcus Aurelius, Epictetus, Seneca. Not like a scholar, but like a man who had just awakened from a long sleep and for the first time had words to name the emotions he had suppressed for so long. It's not the event that hurts us, but the way we interpret it. That sentence left Tomas silent, because for the first time he realized that his anger didn't come from the outside world. It came from the stories he told himself in his own mind. Every time someone hurt him, his mind added, speculated, judged, and that hurt him more than the actual event. A critique from his boss could have been constructive feedback, but he heard it as belittlement. A message seen but unanswered could have been accidental, but he took it as disrespect. The way his mind interpreted events was the true root of the pain. And what made Tomas cry was realizing one simple truth no one had ever taught him. Calmness isn't something you're born with. It's a skill. It's something you can train. Just like muscles are built with repeated workouts, the mind can be trained to stay steady through small choices. The choice not to react immediately, the choice not to jump to judgment, the choice to see clearly before responding. From that night on, Tomas began to change. Not through grand declarations, but through very small actions. He learned to pause before replying, to take a deep breath before sending an email. When that tightness in his chest came, rather than swallowing it, he would step outside and walk for a few minutes. Those things didn't stop the anger from appearing, but they helped him avoid being fully controlled by it. There were still moments of failure. He still lost his temper, still acted on impulse, still made mistakes. But the difference was he no longer felt ashamed for it. He observed himself, and with each stumble he stood back up faster, calmer. Friends began to notice the change, but no one said anything. They just saw that he reacted less harshly, spoke more slowly, listened more deeply. He no longer needed to be right. He didn't need to win every argument. He started to radiate a quiet kind of presence, the kind that comes from someone no longer dragged around by others' moods. Amos didn't become a philosopher, but he became a version of himself he never thought possible. A calm man. Not because the world around him grew more peaceful, but because inside him there was no longer an uncontrollable storm. And that was the first step to true freedom. Not freedom on the outside, but freedom from the automatic reactions that kept him in constant battle mode. Maybe you've never been Tomas, but if you've ever felt like you exploded over something small, if you've ever walked away from an argument and regretted how you reacted, if you've ever wondered why you can't seem to stay calm, then perhaps you're walking the same road Tomas once did. And that's nothing to be ashamed of, because we all begin there. The only question is, are you ready to pause and begin training your mind? Calmness doesn't come from a peaceful environment. It comes from inner steadiness. And sometimes it all begins with one moment of awakening when you realize your mind can be retrained, little by little, to become an ally instead of the silent betrayer it once was. Tomas did it. And if he could begin on a night of crisis, then so can you, right here, right now. There are days when you wake up full of energy, your determination shining like the early morning sun. But just one misaligned event, a tactless comment, a flawed email, or simply a traffic jam that lasts too long, and your mind begins to unravel. A small trigger sends you spiraling into dozens of chaotic thoughts. I'm useless. They don't respect me. This is only going to get worse. From a neutral situation, your mind writes a tragedy, and you believe it as if it were the only truth. No one has to sabotage you. Your mind does it on its own. Don't confuse the ability to think with the ability to control your thoughts. Humans possess a miraculous brain, but precisely because it's so complex, it can easily become a self-destructive tool if left unguided. When you don't actively train it, the mind will do what it does best. Imagine, exaggerate, overreact, and pull you away from the present moment. It doesn't ask whether you want to follow. It grabs you by the hand, drags you through the past to ruminate, then leaps into the future to worry. All of this happens in your head, but the result is that you lose control in real life. Picture your mind as a wild horse that hasn't been tamed. If left to roam freely, it will gallop wildly, kick up dust, and charge into the forest without direction. But if you learn to hold the reins, if you sit firmly in the saddle and study its movements, that horse can carry you through extraordinary paths. The problem is most people have never learned to hold the reins. They were never taught that the mind must be trained. Like muscles, like habits, like a survival skill. Instead, they let the mind run wild and then wonder why they feel exhausted, lost, and disoriented. Anyone who has ever fallen into overthinking knows this feeling well. You can't stop. Every situation becomes fuel for hundreds of negative possibilities. What if they misunderstood me? What if I lose this opportunity? What if I said the wrong thing and get judged? But the terrifying part doesn't lie in the situation. It lies in self-identification. You can no longer tell what's real and what's imagined. You live as though the worst-case scenario has already happened, while in reality, nothing serious has occurred. That's the moment the wild mind has taken the wheel. The subtle trap is that you think you're in control. You believe your reactions are rational, justified self-defense. But in truth, those reactions stem from a nervous system that hasn't been mastered. You're not responding to reality, you're reacting to a triggered emotion. And when emotion overrides logic, your choices are always instinctual, not intentional. You snap back with sharp words, overreact, or retreat and form negative conclusions about yourself. Every decision is made out of fear, not clarity. You might think, I'm just protecting myself, but in truth, your mind is controlling you like a misplaced remote. A cold look from someone, and your mind translates it as disdain. A small reminder turns into an insult. A minor mistake pointed out by someone immediately sends you back to past failures, and you conclude, I never get anything right. You're no longer living in the present. You're living in a world created by your wild mind, a place where everything is unstable, everyone is judging you, and you are never enough. This is why Stoicism places such emphasis on observing thoughts, not to suppress, not to deny, but to separate yourself from identification. When Marcus Aurelius wrote, you can stop at any moment and say, this is not me, this is just a thought, He was pointing to a vital life skill, the ability to step outside your own mind and see it performing its act. And only when you can see it clearly can you avoid getting swept away. The first thing you need to learn is not how to stop thinking, but how to know when you are thinking. Only when you become aware of the thought stream can you intervene, redirect it, or simply not join in. When you realize you're being pulled away, you have the power to pause. You can breathe. You can create space. You can say to yourself, I won't jump into this drama. This is not theoretical. This is a survival strategy for a psychologically chaotic era. You can't control everything that happens out there, but you can always learn to control your inner response, and it begins with one small choice. Don't immediately believe every thought you have. Observe it, question it. Ask, am I sure this is true? Is there a more positive and fair way to look at this? That break in the thought pattern, even just for a few seconds, is the moment you reclaim the reins. Your mind is not the enemy, but if left untrained, it will inadvertently become a wild force of destruction. Pause. Learn to recognize when it's running amok, and instead of chasing after it, choose to stand still. In that very stillness, you'll find true freedom. Freedom from unconscious reactions, from false judgments, from the storms inside you that you created yourself. You cannot live a peaceful life if the one steering you is an untrained mind. And you don't need to wait another day to begin that training. Because the moment you've read this far, you've already taken one step out of default mode. The only question left is, will you hold the reins steady or let the wild horse drag you away once more? If you don't control your mind, don't be surprised when it controls your life. A seemingly harmless comment, you could do better. That alone. But if your mind hasn't been trained, it will instantly translate it into, I'm inadequate. They're disappointed in me. I'm being judged. And from there, a wave of negative emotions crashes in. You start recalling past mistakes, constructing scenarios of rejection, exclusion, and being looked down upon. All of it didn't stem from the original statement, but from how you interpreted it. It was your labeling, your assumptions, your meaning-making of a neutral signal that triggered emotions you didn't see coming. It's not the world that hurts you. It's the story you tell yourself about the world. Emotions aren't wrong, but emotions aren't always right either. Emotions are just signals. Interpretation is the filter that determines how you react. If you change the lens, the emotion changes with it. That's not delusional optimism. It's a psychological truth backed by extensive research. Your brain, especially the amygdala, can't distinguish between a real threat and an imagined scenario. To it, a real lion or a vague sarcastic remark can both trigger a panic response if you interpret the situation as a danger. Have you ever found yourself irritated all day because someone walked past without saying hello? Maybe they were distracted, didn't notice you, or had something on their mind. But if you immediately interpret that behavior as disrespect, as intentionally ignoring you, then every emotion that follows, annoyance, hurt pride, coldness, is the inevitable result. Not because they didn't greet you, but because you decided what that act meant. Your emotion is real, but the story behind it might be completely wrong. The danger lies in the fact that most of these interpretive processes happen unconsciously. You don't realize you're writing the script. You don't notice that your mind is secretly adding lines to the narrative. And then you react as if that script were the truth. You get angry, defensive, you withdraw, not because the event was severe, but because you believed it was meant to hurt you. It all started from an unchecked interpretation. Marcus Aurelius once wrote, if you are distressed by anything external, the pain is not due to the thing itself, but to your estimate of it, and this you have the power to revoke at any moment. That statement isn't about blaming yourself. It reminds you that between stimulus and response, there is always a gap. And in that gap, you have the power to choose how to interpret. If you choose to view it as a threat, your mind will prepare for defense. If you choose to see it as an opportunity, your mind will open to learning. The facts remain unchanged, but the meaning you assign to them completely alters your inner state. Negative interpretation isn't innate. It's shaped by past experiences when you were judged, rejected, or hurt. Those memories lead you to develop an early warning system, to prepare for disappointment by expecting the worst. The problem is you apply this defense mechanism to every situation, even harmless ones. You scan the code as if everyone has bad intentions. And the result is that you live in constant, unnecessary tension. To change this, you don't need to become an extreme optimist. You just need to delay your conclusions. When a situation triggers emotion, don't trust it right away. Pause and ask, am I jumping to conclusions? Is there another way to interpret this? Simply by creating a breathing space between the event and your reaction, you've gained more power. You're no longer acting on instinct. You're making a conscious choice. One of the most effective tools to train this ability is writing. Write down the event that just occurred. Then write your emotional response. Then write an alternative perspective, a more positive one, even if it's just hypothetical. This process helps you realize that emotions aren't the only truth. You begin to see multiple layers of meaning, alternative explanations, and from there your mind becomes more flexible, less extreme. Remember, confidence doesn't come from being universally liked or never being criticized. It comes from not being shaken by unchecked interpretations. You hear, you feel, but you don't react right away. You create space between emotion and action, and in that space, you reclaim ownership of your life. No one is immune to emotions, but true maturity lies in knowing that emotions can be examined, reinterpreted, viewed from another angle, and that, rather than perfection, is what builds inner resilience. Emotions are like waves. You can't stop them from rising, but you can learn not to be swept away. And the first step to staying grounded is not to trust your first emotion as absolute truth. Treat it as a signal to investigate. Adjust your interpretation. Choose the story that doesn't hurt you but helps you grow. Not to sugarcoat reality, but to look at it with the calm needed to navigate it wisely. And if you can do this every day, bit by bit, you'll be surprised to find that most of your pain didn't come from the world, but from how you told yourself the story of that world. Rewriting the narrative is how you heal unnecessary emotions, and that is the beginning of emotional intelligence. Not in knowing more, but in deeply understanding how your own mind works. Emotions don't ask for permission before they appear. They don't knock. They erupt. Suddenly, without warning, a sarcastic remark, a cold glance, a vague injustice. Just a single moment is enough to send your heart racing, your palms cold, your throat tightening, and a storm rising in your head. Most people react in that very instant. They blurt things out, act on impulse or retreat in silent anger. And only after it's over do they realize what they've lost. Control, composure, and sometimes even self-respect. But here's something you must remember. Emotions are automatic. Reactions are not. Emotions may stem from survival instincts, but how you behave is a choice. And if you can recognize the moment when the emotional wave begins to rise, then you can absolutely learn how not to be swept away by it. In both Stoic philosophy and modern psychology, there are three simple yet incredibly powerful skills that help you keep your hands on the wheel when emotion strikes. These three skills don't require deep meditation or enlightenment. They begin in the ordinary moments of life, and that's why they are so practical. The first skill, pause for 3 seconds. Not 5 minutes, not an hour, just 3 seconds. But they are decisive seconds. When emotion rises, your nervous system, particularly the amygdala, takes the lead. It puts your body into fight, react, or defend mode. But the moment you inhale slowly and silently, count 1, 2, 3, you begin shifting control back to the prefrontal cortex, the part of the brain responsible for logic, reasoning, and conscious decision-making. Those 3 seconds are the buffer zone that keeps you from saying something hurtful, from doing something you'll regret. 3 seconds to reclaim the role of the driver instead of being dragged along. The second skill, rewrite the inner narrative. When someone hurts you, your first reaction is usually, they don't respect me. They did that on purpose. I'm being looked down on. But the truth is, you don't know what they were thinking. You're only guessing. And that guess, if left unchecked, becomes fuel for anger, pain, and misunderstanding. Rewriting the story doesn't mean making excuses for others. It means allowing yourself to look at the situation from another angle. Softer, fairer, less dramatic. Try replacing, they disrespected me with, maybe they didn't realize their words upset me. You'll immediately feel the emotion shift. No more battle narrative. No more victim role. Just space for conversation and understanding. The third skill, activate observer mode. Imagine that you're not the main character in that moment, but someone watching a replay of your own scene. When someone angers you, instead of exploding, imagine you're an outsider looking in. If this were a movie, what should the character do to stay true to themselves? Observer mode creates the psychological distance you need to avoid being consumed by emotion. It stops you from identifying with the anger and starts helping you analyze it. And only when you stand outside of your emotions can you begin to steer them toward a more beneficial outcome. The difference between someone who reacts and someone who regulates their emotions lies in this moment. The reactor is led by the wild mind. The regulator pauses just long enough to put their hand back on the wheel. These 3 skills, pausing for 3 seconds, rewriting the story, activating observer mode, are the 3 fingers that grip that wheel. And the beautiful part is, no one can take that power from you. You only need to practice it until it becomes your new instinct. At first, you'll forget. You'll react the old way. But every time you remember, you're making progress. Every time you pause between emotion and response, even just slightly, you're rebuilding your nervous system. You're reprogramming your reaction map, and over time, calm no longer feels like a forced effort. It becomes your new reflex. You won't have to suppress anything, because inside there's already enough space to avoid overflow. Calm people aren't calm because they've never felt anger. They've just learned not to let anger decide their dignity. Skillful people aren't skillful because they've never wanted to fight back. They simply choose the right moment to respond with steadiness instead of letting emotion steer the wheel. Take a look at your day. How many situations could have been less serious if you had just paused for 3 seconds? How many misunderstandings could have been avoided if you had rewritten the story instead of reacting to your assumption? How many arguments could have been skipped if you had seen the situation from observer mode instead of from the victim's lens? These questions aren't meant to make you regret. They are reminders that you can do things differently, starting from this very moment. No one teaches you how to regulate emotions in school, but you can learn it, one situation at a time. And when these 3 skills become part of your daily response, you'll realize you're not just controlling emotions, you're reclaiming sovereignty over your inner life. That's the foundation of emotional intelligence. It's the inner strength that keeps you from being pulled by the external world. It's the act of living deliberately instead of reactively. And it's also the first step toward becoming untouchable by anyone or anything unless you allow it. Anger doesn't need to scream to destroy you. It only needs a second. A single second when you fail to pause, fail to distinguish between emotion and truth. Just 1 second, and it's enough to let slip words that hurt others, to act in ways you'll regret for days, and to shatter the image you've worked so hard to build. Anger is a flood, and like all floods, it doesn't just sweep away reason, it erodes your dignity little by little. More broadly, human life, in those moments of lost control, you are no longer yourself. You've handed the wheel to your lowest instincts. And the danger is, you don't even realize you've just given away your most precious asset, your self-mastery. Some people believe anger is a sign of strength. But the harsh truth is, the more easily you get angry, the more easily you can be controlled. Someone makes a sarcastic remark and you respond just as they hoped. A disrespectful gesture and you immediately lash out in return. Without realizing it, you're giving others the power to press your emotional buttons. They don't need to do much, just the right move to hit your weak spot, and you explode, destroy, and surrender your inner authority all on your own. Anger doesn't just scorch the present moment, it leaves lingering damage. Cracks in relationships, apologies that come too late, poor decisions made in a minute of lost composure. And what's more, what you thought was worth getting angry about today often seems trivial a week later. You may forget the event, but the consequences of your reaction remain. Look at public examples. Will Smith, a beloved artist at the peak of his career, only needed to take a few steps on stage and deliver one slap to change the way the world sees him. Disagreements, pain, pressure. Those might all be real. But when anger takes over, logic disconnects, and in just a few seconds, an image built over decades can crack before millions. Making a mistake, the regret, no brutal act was needed, just one unchecked reaction, and the cost may be your reputation, your credibility, even the respect you have for yourself. Seneca, who observed human nature throughout his life, once said, "The angry man is always more miserable than the one he's angry at, because anger is never just a one-time thing. It replays in your head, echoing at night, returning the next morning like a tape stuck on loop in your unconscious. You think you're retaliating, but in truth, you're the one stuck living with a prolonged emotional wound of your own making. Anger is a biological response, but refusing to let it control you is a decision. Modern neuroscience reveals that an unreinforced wave of anger only lasts about 90 seconds. 90 seconds. Can you handle that? A YouTube ad lasts longer, but the problem is you don't let it pass. You hold on to it, feed it with memory, with assumption, with imagined revenge scenarios, and so 90 seconds turns into 90 minutes, 90 days, or 9 years of mental torment. There's a simple strategy. When anger rises, don't speak, don't text, don't react. Just sit still, breathe, and count to 90. That's not weakness, that's power. The kind of power that can keep your hand from striking, your words from wounding, and more importantly, preserve the character you don't want to lose. Don't let someone unworthy have the power to drag you down to the lowest version of yourself. If silence feels hard, take physical action. Anger is physical energy. It floods your muscles, tightens your chest, quickens your heartbeat. Walk. Clench your fists and release them. Move your body as if discharging excess electricity. It may sound simple, but it's how you prevent destructive energy from building up and exploding at the wrong moment. You are not a machine. You are someone who can transform. One crucial question can save you in countless moments. Will this still matter a week from now? If you answer honestly, most things are not worth sacrificing your inner peace over. Don't become the person who has to apologize for exploding over something you'll later deem meaningless. If anger is a thief, what does it steal? Not just calm, but foresight, the ability to sustain relationships, the clarity to make sound decisions while under pressure. It wastes your energy on unnecessary battles. Worse, it makes you forget who truly has the power to decide. You are the one who chooses what is allowed into your emotional space. You can't stop others from speaking disrespectfully, but you can choose to respond in a way that doesn't diminish your integrity. You don't have to stay silent forever, but you can choose the timing to respond with intelligence rather than reacting out of instinct. The most easily manipulated person is the one who angers most easily, because others only need to touch the right nerve, and you destroy your own balance. On the other hand, the person who cannot be easily provoked, who maintains a calm gaze and a steady tone, that is the one others fear, because they are unreadable. They don't get swept into someone else's emotional script, and they don't easily lose their clarity. Anger is not the enemy, if you understand it as a signal, not a command. It's an alert, not an order. But when you confuse the two, you hand over your decision-making power to something that was only meant to warn you. And in that very moment, you lose self-mastery. Remember, what makes you respectable is not how often you get angry, but how often you choose not to react, even when you have every reason to. Staying calm in chaos doesn't make you weak. It makes you trustworthy and fearsome in the way that no one dares underestimate, because the one who controls their anger is the one no one else can control. Important thing is, no one is immune to moments of insult, misunderstanding, or emotional pain. But what determines whether you become a victim or a master of yourself does not lie in the situation. It lies in the first 90 seconds that follow. In that time frame, your body launches a biological reaction. Your heart races, breathing quickens, muscles tighten, and your mind begins crafting a flood of retaliation scenarios. You only have two choices: control or explode. And that choice, though invisible, is shaping the person you are becoming. Neuroscience has revealed a remarkable truth. A surge of anger, if not fueled further, lasts only about 90 seconds. The body needs less than 2 minutes to process the initial biological wave of intense emotion, which means if you can hold your ground in those first 90 seconds, saying nothing, doing nothing, not adding fuel to the fire, then the anger will recede like a wave retreating from the shore. But if you replay the story in your head, relive the insult, imagine the perfect comeback, you're choosing to keep the anger alive. You turn a wave into a storm simply because you never learned how to leave it alone. Most adults don't stay angry for too long. They just cling to their anger for too long. And the painful part is they believe they're justified. They call it righteous anger, a legitimate reaction to injustice. But the truth is, you are using the past to burn the present. You hold on to a flame that should have died out by the second minute, and you use it to scorch your relationships, your health, your spirit, and sometimes the very character you are trying to protect. Try pausing just once in that peak moment. Feel the tremble in your chest, the burning in your throat, the stiffness in your palms, the heartbeat gone out of rhythm. Don't rush to push it away. Don't rush to interpret or justify. Just stay still, breathe slowly, and do nothing. Don't send a message. Don't react. Don't speak just to regain control. In that very act of non-reaction, you're doing something most people forget: protecting yourself from yourself. A simple yet powerful strategy: count to 90. Slowly, clearly, steadily. You don't need deep meditation or mountaintop solitude. You just need 90 seconds to stop yourself from becoming the version you'll have to apologize for later. This isn't avoidance. This is taking active responsibility to protect your character from being shattered by a fleeting emotion. You may think, I can't stay silent when I'm disrespected, but you can. You're not silent out of fear. You're silent because not reacting immediately is a sign of inner strength. Those who are easily provoked are easily manipulated. Those who must strike back immediately haven't yet mastered their own power. Those who dare to remain silent in the storm are those who cannot be easily controlled. Emotion is energy, and if not released properly, it accumulates and pushes you toward the edge. But release doesn't mean unleashing it recklessly. It means channeling it with intent. Anger should be transformed, not dumped on others. Go for a brisk walk, breathe deeply, clench your fists and then let go, or simply stand under cold water for a few minutes. The body needs movement to release. But words must wait until your mind is calm enough to choose wisely. One question can shift everything. Will this still matter a week from now? In the moment, every insult feels like a fatal blow. But 7 days later, 9 times out of 10, you'll realize it wasn't worth ruining your evening, your relationship, or your peace. The first emotion is always real, but the one you choose to hold on to is your decision. And you can choose not to keep what makes you weaker. Some people live their entire lives in unresolved anger. They carry a skeptical gaze, a tense body, a heart quick to break. But if they had learned to stand strong for just those 90 seconds, just 90 seconds, they could have changed the way they saw life. No longer trapped in reactivity, no longer apologizing for words they should never have spoken, no longer losing their image to a momentary lapse of control. Those 90 seconds aren't just a unit of time, they are a test of character, the line between instinct and choice, the moment where you prove you are no longer a victim of your emotions, but the master of them. And when you master this, you don't just surprise others with your composure, you earn your own respect because you know you have passed the hardest test, not outside, but inside yourself. Hold steady through those 90 seconds, and you don't just hold your calm, you hold your freedom. And sometimes you hold your most precious assets, your dignity untouched by insult, your character unharmed by impulse, and your authority respected without needing to raise your voice. Because the one who cannot be easily dragged into battle is the one no one can defeat. You don't need to shout to be heard. You don't need to win every argument to prove your worth. In a world where noise reigns, where everyone tries to stand out by speaking louder, interrupting more, displaying themselves more forcefully, the person who can remain calm is the one who commands the most respect. Because calmness, when properly controlled, is not the silence of the weak, it is silent power. A form of strength that doesn't need to show off or draw attention, and yet always makes others take a step back to reflect. Have you ever met someone whose silence alone seems to stop the room? Not because they're afraid to speak, but because they don't need to. They choose their moments to speak, and when they do, people listen. Not because of volume, but because of weight. A calm person doesn't let emotion dictate their words. They weigh every word, every reaction, every gesture, and that alone carries more impact than any outburst ever could. On the battlefield, the one who doesn't panic is the most dangerous. While others flail and falter, the true warrior walks steadily through the smoke, hand firm on his weapon, eyes locked on his target. He doesn't yell, doesn't charge blindly, doesn't lose control. He calculates, observes, and acts only when necessary. Because he knows that every rash movement is a vulnerability, every impulsive reaction is a risk. The one who keeps a cool head is the one who controls the game. Real life is no different. In a meeting, when someone launches a public criticism, the instinctive reaction is to fight back, defend yourself, scramble to reclaim control. But those with real inner strength do the opposite. They pause for a few seconds, breathe, and speak only what needs to be said. No more, no less. They don't need to win the exchange. They just need to maintain self-possession. Because they understand the one who speaks most doesn't necessarily control the room. But the one who isn't provoked by noise always controls themselves and therefore influences the atmosphere around them. Calmness doesn't come from avoiding conflict. It comes from not being pulled into it. You can speak your truth, set boundaries, stand for your principles, but do all that without losing yourself. No bitterness, no need to prove who's right, just enough poise not to be swept up in someone else's emotional spiral. That's what makes you stand out, without trying to. Marcus Aurelius once wrote, "The best answer to anger is silence." He didn't say that from submission, but from the perspective of a Roman emperor, a man who had the power to sentence anyone to death. And precisely because he held absolute power, he understood this deeply. It's easy to end another's life, but to kill the impulse within yourself, that is real strength. Today, people mistakenly equate fast reactions with intelligence, strong reactions with courage, but the truth is the opposite. The one who can delay their reaction, wait for the emotional wave to settle, and only then respond, is the one with true inner readiness. It's a kind of emotional intelligence that doesn't seek applause, but it makes you the steady anchor among those who are constantly swaying. When you stay calm, you don't just protect yourself from foolish actions, you create a zone of positive influence. People around you feel safe near you. They trust how you handle things. They respect you, even though you never asked for it. Because calmness has a quiet ripple effect. It makes others soften their tone, slow their pace, and step back when facing you. In a tense negotiation, one party kept threatening, raising their voice, switching tone to apply pressure. But the other, a middle-aged man with a gentle voice, never changed his demeanor. He answered slowly, never rushed, never got pulled into the other's rhythm. And then something strange happened. The first party gradually slowed down too, grew less aggressive, and the negotiation shifted toward cooperation. He didn't do anything except keep his breath steady, and that alone gave him control over the entire room. Being calm doesn't mean you feel nothing. It means you know exactly what you feel. But don't let that emotion decide for you. You can be angry, disappointed, hurt, and still choose to respond, not react. And that ability to choose again and again is how you forge a power that no one gives you, but that you build within yourself. Don't fear that being too calm will let others take advantage. The reality is the opposite. Those who are easily shaken are easy targets. But the one whose composure is like still water, undisturbed even when stones are thrown, is the one who halts chaos. They don't need to declare anything. Their presence is the declaration. And finally, understand this. Staying calm is not about suppressing. It's about choosing the right time to speak. It's not about bottling things up forever, but about only expressing them when necessary. It's not about appearing noble, but about never handing your dignity over to anyone, no matter how offensive they may be. You may not be able to control the world, but you can master yourself. And when you can do that, you no longer need to appear strong, because your calmness is your strength, obvious, undeniable. No need to prove, no need to argue. Just show up with a presence that no one can shake. You can do everything right, work twice as hard as others, behave kindly and honestly every single day, and still be overlooked, misjudged, or lose an opportunity to someone who didn't try nearly as hard as you. And when that happens, your mind wants to rebel. It screams, "This is so unfair. I deserved better. Why does life treat me this way?" That's the moment when most people feel powerless, tense, angry. But what you must understand deeply is this: feeling wronged should never be the reason you lose your inner calm. Life never promised to be fair. No one signed a contract with you guaranteeing that effort would be rewarded, that kindness would be loved, that honesty would be treated with integrity. If you enter life expecting everything to follow logic and moral order, you will be disappointed again and again. The world does not revolve around fairness. It revolves around laws and reality. And in that world, those who remain calm do so not because they are treated fairly, but because they refuse to let external imbalance ruin their inner peace. You don't need some grand example to understand this. Just look around. The hardest workers aren't always recognized. The most loyal people aren't always kept. The most capable aren't always the ones promoted. Life may glorify the loud and forget the quiet. It may reward the wrong people and hurt the right ones. That's not your fault. It's not an exception. It's a reality you must learn to live with. Marta, a woman known for her patience, worked 10 years without a break, never missed a deadline, always delivered. When a promotion came up, she applied, prepared, and gave it everything she had. But the person chosen was a newcomer of just 6 months. The director's nephew Marta quietly packed her things that day, said no harsh words, made no destructive gesture. She walked away with a calm that made others uncomfortable, because no one could understand how she remained so composed. But Marta wasn't resigned. She simply refused to let injustice drag her down with it. She didn't let someone else's poor decisions strip her of her dignity. She left a place that no longer suited her and sought out another, one where she didn't have to fight to be seen. Today, Marta isn't just an employee. She trains new recruits, passing on the greatest lesson. You don't need life to be fair to live with integrity. You just need to not let injustice turn you bitter, cynical, or small. Epictetus once said, "Don't seek for things to happen as you wish, but wish for them to happen as they do, and you will find peace." That's not surrender. It's refusing to waste energy on things you cannot control. Injustice is something you cannot stop, but you always have the power to decide how will you respond to it. There are two roads when faced with unfairness. One is to let it consume you, make you suspicious of everything, sharp-tongued, closed off, and distant from goodwill. The other is to keep your heart clean from the wrongs of others. Not because you're weak, but because you refuse to become the bitter version of yourself that injustice wants to create. Calmness does not mean you don't feel pain. It means you know you're hurt, but still choose not to spread more suffering. It means knowing you deserve more, but not needing to scream to be acknowledged. It means knowing what's right and continuing to do what's right, even when the world doesn't reward you for it. You can't ask the rain to stop just so you won't get wet. But you can carry an umbrella. And if you don't have one, you can walk through the storm without cursing the sky. Because blaming the weather won't make you dry any faster. It only makes you colder. Calmness is that umbrella. When life pours down things you don't deserve, calmness shields you from reckless actions, from hasty decisions, from saying things you'll regret. It keeps you whole, not because life is gentle, but because you didn't let it turn you into something you're not. And that, in the quietest way, is an inner victory. The victory of someone who doesn't need revenge to feel that justice has been served. The victory of someone who doesn't need to win over others, only not lose to themselves. Because in this world, the one who keeps calm in the chaos isn't just resilient, they are untouchable. You may be in the middle of a season where nothing feels fair. You may have lost an opportunity, been misunderstood, or judged unfairly, but that is not a reason to revolt or abandon the values you live by. On the contrary, it's the test to see whether you truly own yourself when nothing outside supports you. Because fairness may not arrive soon, but calmness, if you choose it, can arrive now. And once you have it, the world no longer has the power to break you. You don't need to win everywhere. You just need not to lose within your own soul. And that is something no one can ever take from you. Emotions don't come from events, they come from how you think about those events. The same words spoken to two people. One hears them and remains calm, the other feels hurt for a week. The same situation, one sees it as a learning opportunity, the other as an insult. The event doesn't change, only the internal interpretation does. And that difference in thought creates two completely opposite lives, one governed by volatile emotions and one anchored in inner stability. The astonishing truth is, both people live in the same world. If you want to live more calmly, you don't need to change your circumstances, you need to change how you see them. Because emotion is the end result of a chain of thoughts. You're not angry because someone said something. You're angry because you interpreted their words as an attack on you. You're not sad because of rejection. You're sad because you believe it means you're not good enough. You're not anxious about the future. You're anxious because you've already constructed the worst-case scenario in your mind. Your mind is a master storyteller. It constantly builds narratives, fills in gaps with assumptions, and concludes based on old patterns. But what most people don't realize is you can intervene in that process. You can learn to rewrite the script, And when you change the script, something magical happens. Your emotions change with it. Imagine sending an important message to someone. An hour passes and there's no reply. Instantly your mind starts interpreting. Maybe they're upset with me. Maybe I said something wrong. Maybe they're ignoring me on purpose. Those thoughts, if left unchecked, lead to emotions, tension, frustration, insecurity. But if you change the interpretation to maybe they're busy, maybe they haven't read it, maybe they need time to respond, you'll feel your emotions soften. The event doesn't change, but by thinking differently, your entire inner experience changes. This isn't blind optimism. It's the conscious act of shaping your emotional response. It's the right to choose an interpretation that doesn't drain you. In psychology, this is known as cognitive reframing. It means you don't change the facts, you change your perspective on those facts. And the surprising part is, even a small shift in thought can create a big shift in how you feel. Marcus Aurelius, a Roman emperor who lived through war, plagues, and rebellion, once wrote, "If you are distressed by anything external, the pain is not due to the thing itself, but to your estimate of it. And this you have the power to revoke at any moment." That quote doesn't deny pain. It gives you back power. The power to choose whether or not to let your mind continue spinning negative interpretations. And from the moment you realize this, you're no longer a victim of emotion. You become the creator of it. Try applying this in daily life. When someone criticizes you, instead of thinking, "They're looking down on me," try asking, maybe they're speaking from their own limited perspective. Is this really true? Is there something I can learn from this feedback? When you're rejected, instead of thinking, "I'm not good enough," try, "Maybe this wasn't the right opportunity. Maybe I'll thrive elsewhere." You're not sugarcoating. You're choosing the version of the truth that doesn't break you. Thoughts aren't just cognitive tools. They're emotional levers. And when you learn to shift your thinking, you gain control over how you feel. It's a crucial transition from reactive living to intentional living. Of course, this isn't easy. Your mind has old grooves, well-worn paths of thinking. It reacts the way you've reacted dozens of times before. But that doesn't mean it can't change. Every time you pause, reconsider how you're thinking, ask a different question, you're carving a new groove. And over time, the new pattern becomes stronger than the old. You no longer need to try to think differently, you naturally do. Think back to situations that once caused you great distress. Looking back now, weren't many of them less serious than they seemed? Weren't your emotions back then based on stories you now see were flawed? That's proof that when you change how you think, you feel differently. And if that's true of the past, it's just as true of the present. You don't need to change the whole world. You only need to learn how to retell the story in your head more truthfully and more gently. A simple technique to start with is writing down, "What am I thinking?" Then compare it to, "What do I know is true?" And finally, "How else could I see this in a more positive and fair way?" Those three questions are enough to pull you out of the mind's negative spiral, and if you repeat that often enough, you'll find yourself becoming calmer, less defensive, and more at ease in your own skin. You don't have to be optimistic all the time, but you do need to have other options in your thinking. And when you realize you can choose to think differently, you'll also feel lighter, clearer, because you're no longer led by your emotions, you're the one steering the wheel. Changing your thoughts doesn't change the world, but it changes how you live in the world. And that, in the end, is the difference between a life ruled by chaos and a life anchored in inner freedom. The past always holds something that makes you ache. The future is full of things that make you worry, but there is one thing neither can give you: control. Whether you replay a mistake over and over or worry about the worst-case scenario, you still can't change the past or grasp the future. Every time your mind drifts to places you no longer live or haven't yet arrived, you are abandoning the only place where you truly have the power to act, the present moment. You cannot rewrite what has already happened. You cannot guarantee what is to come. But you can decide in this very moment what you will do with your attention, your attitude, your energy, and your actions. The present is the only place where you can influence the course of your life. Have you ever felt stretched thin by a dozen thoughts? One part of you regretting not being braver in the past, another part fearing what might go wrong tomorrow. Meanwhile, the moment you are living slips away like water through your hands. You could be sitting in a peaceful evening, but your mind is replaying a failure from 3 years ago. You could be enjoying a good meal, but your mind is tangled in anxiety about tomorrow's meeting. Each time this happens, you are trading away the present to live inside the illusion of memory and prediction. Epictetus once taught, some things are within your control and some are not. Wisdom lies in focusing on the first and letting go of the second. Ironically, most of the stress we experience comes from trying to control what we simply can't. You want to redo a conversation you messed up. You want others to think well of you. You want to avoid all uncertainty, but the more you try to control what's out of reach, the more you disconnect from the one thing you truly own, your attitude in this moment. Imagine you're in a room, but you keep opening the window to peer into the neighbor's house, where the past resides, or staring out toward the intersection, where the future awaits. Meanwhile, you forget the room you're actually living in, the one you can rearrange, clean, and restore. That's the price you pay when your mind wanders. Every time it does, you miss the chance to create a meaningful present. Returning to the present isn't about neglecting the past or being irresponsible about the future. It's the awakening to the truth that the present is the only place where you truly exist. The past is just images stored in memory. The future is images created by imagination. But your body, your breath, your actions only exist here, now. If you want to control your emotional reactions, you can't do it by endlessly analyzing the past or worrying about what hasn't happened yet. You need to learn how to notice what is happening inside you in this moment. Are you clenching your fists, holding your breath, shrinking inward? Just pausing, taking a deep breath, and asking yourself, what am I truly feeling right now? You begin to take back control from automatic reaction. The mind doesn't like the present because the present demands confrontation, demands presence. The mind prefers to flee, to avoid, but it is full presence in the moment that restores your personal power. You can't choose what will happen next, but you can always choose, how will I respond to it? With presence or with old reflexes. One powerful way to return to the present is to reconnect with your body. Pause. Place your hand on your abdomen, feel your breath, listen to your heartbeat. Bring awareness to the soles of your feet, hear the sounds around you. Notice the warmth or breeze. These actions pull you out of mental noise and return you to reality, where there is no regret, no anxiety, only life unfolding right now. When you live in the present, you become clearer. Your decisions become sharper. Your responses become intentional. You're no longer pulled by imagined catastrophes or echoes from the past. You know what you're doing, why you're doing it, and whether it's truly worth your energy. That kind of mindfulness is the foundation of all change. In truth, you don't need a whole year to live differently. You just need one awakened moment repeated again and again. Every time you return to the present, you rewrite your brain's autopilot. You pause before reacting. You recognize emotion before acting. You see things as they are, not through the lens of memory or expectation. You can start very simply. Each day, set 3 reminders. Where is your mind right now? If you find yourself drifting into the past or racing into the future, bring yourself back with a breath. Each time you do, you practice becoming intentional, not reactive, not robotic, but present and in control. The present is the only stage where you are allowed to act. Everything else is just memory or illusion. So if you want to change something, begin in this very moment. Breathe, show up, observe, and take action with clarity. That's not just how you manage emotions. That's how you reclaim inner freedom. And once you master the moment, nothing in life can manipulate you again. When the mind starts to spiral, the usual advice is just calm down. But the truth is, the more you try to sit still, the more your head spins. Uninvited thoughts keep pouring in like a flood. Unfinished tasks, unsaid words, past mistakes, imagined worst-case scenarios, all of it blending into a chaotic symphony. And the danger is this: if you don't redirect it, your mind will automatically take the darkest path. You don't need to fight your thoughts, you just need to channel that energy into something more specific through physical action, using your hands. The mind is not separate from the body. When the brain becomes overloaded, one of the most effective ways to restore balance is to activate the nervous system through purposeful physical movement, especially through the hands, which contain tens of thousands of nerve endings. These are central connectors between the sensory, motor, and emotional regions of the brain. When you do something with your hands, even something as simple as folding clothes, handwriting, washing dishes, coloring, or rearranging a drawer, you are activating a mechanism that brings the mind back to the present without having to force yourself into positive thinking. You don't need to draw well nor create anything elaborate. You just need your hands to engage in a specific and simple task, and your brain will naturally regulate itself. Because when your hands move, the brain must coordinate, and in doing so, the regions responsible for worry are temporarily powered down. Not because the problems disappear, but because your energy is no longer stuck in the endless loop of mental analysis. A friend of mine once had a very particular habit. Whenever she felt overwhelmed, she didn't sleep, she didn't meditate, she grabbed a broom and started sweeping. As she pulled each stroke of the broom, she imagined she was sweeping her mind clean. By the time she finished, her head felt lighter. I laughed when I first heard this, but one night when my mind was a tangled mess, I tried it. And I understood exactly why it works. We live in an age where most activity happens in the head: thinking, planning, comparing, analyzing. Simple physical movements are neglected, replaced by information overload and the constant stream of digital devices. But your body didn't evolve just to think. It needs to do something concrete to feel grounded and balanced. The hands are tools to anchor your mind. When you use your hands to do something specific, you pull energy down from your head into your body, grounding it in reality. Because physical action is something the mind cannot ignore. It is forced to adjust. It is forced to be present. No one can clean a house while mentally running through hundreds of catastrophic scenarios. No one can sew stitch by stitch while their mind continues to spiral. You don't need to be a creative person. You just need to use your hands as a way to restore your natural balance. In Stoic philosophy, there is a concept called vertice, a quality developed through action. A Stoic doesn't sit around lulling themselves with positive affirmations. They act, they engage. They channel energy from the mind into the world. And the hands are the smallest yet most powerful place to begin doing that. No teacher needed, no perfection required, just action. When you feel anxious, wash the dishes. When you find yourself stuck in a loop of thoughts, rearrange your workspace. When you feel inexplicably uneasy, handwrite on paper. What am I thinking? What am I feeling? And keep writing. No editing, no judging. As long as your hands are moving, your mind will settle. Don't underestimate the power of what seems like trivial actions. They are the simplest and most effective ways to pull you out of the emotional grip and return you to a state where you can steer yourself. When you do something with your hands, you're declaring, I'm not helpless. I still have choices. I'm reclaiming control of my energy. I once witnessed a middle-aged man after a tense meeting walk outside, not to smoke like he usually did, but to pick up pebbles around the yard and line them up in a row. No one understood what he was doing, but after 15 minutes he came back and spoke clearly, sharply, calmly, because his hands had helped him reorganize the mess in his head. No advice needed, no theory, just action. That doesn't mean you're avoiding your emotions. On the contrary, you're giving them a healthy exit door. Not through outbursts, not through suppression, but through transformation via specific action. And with each time you do that, you train yourself into a new reflex. Instead of being consumed by emotion, you redirect it through the body, starting with your hands. You don't need to wait for peace to return to yourself. It is precisely when your mind is in chaos that you most need to anchor yourself in small actions. Actions not done out of habit, but done to pull yourself back to the present and reclaim control from within. If you're feeling overwhelmed, stop thinking. Do something with your hands. Something small is enough. But make it certain, make it slow, one movement at a time. It's not just a way to reduce tension. It's how you remind yourself that you are still in charge, one small act at a time. Calmness doesn't arrive as a gift granted to the lucky. It doesn't fall from the sky when life becomes smooth, nor is it a reward after you've weathered every storm. In the harsh and irrational reality of life, calmness is a deliberate choice, sometimes made in the midst of injustice, pressure, or danger. And the one who chooses calmness is the one holding the highest form of inner power. Most of us wait for calmness as if it's a state that should already be present. I'll be calm if everything goes well. I'll be calm if the other person changes. But that mindset only turns you into a hostage of circumstance. You surrender your internal state to the external world, where you have no control. That's a guaranteed formula for chaos. A person with inner strength is not someone who avoids adversity. They are simply someone who doesn't let adversity dictate their emotions. When misunderstood, they don't immediately react. When insulted, they don't rush to defend their ego. When placed in a disadvantageous situation, they don't panic. They don't wait to feel calm before acting. They choose to act calmly even when they don't feel like it, because they understand emotional states cannot be the compass for behavior. We grow up in a society that rewards quick reactions, instant responses, arguments to win. But the people you respect the most are rarely those who fight for attention. They're the ones who quietly maintain their composure in the chaos. They speak little, but their words carry weight. They do much, but don't flaunt it. Above all, they know this truth. If you cannot master your inner world, then everything on the outside, no matter how promising, will only ever be fleeting. Calmness is not the absence of emotion. It is the courage not to be swept away by emotion. When someone makes you angry, the instinctive response is to fire back. But if you pause for a second, take a deep breath, and ask yourself, what do I really want out of this situation? Then you're choosing a higher level of response. You are not being driven, you are driving. In neuroscience, the prefrontal cortex, the area responsible for logical decision-making, gets temporarily disconnected when you're in a heightened emotional state. That's when emotional reflexes take control of your actions. But if you train yourself to pause before reacting, you give your brain a chance to re-engage its rational center, and calmness ceases to be a random occurrence and becomes a trainable skill. Recall the last time you reacted while losing control. Maybe you said something you shouldn't have, did something you regretted, or damaged a relationship that was perfectly fine, all because you waited to feel calm instead of choosing calmness. Emotions can be understood, observed, accepted, but they don't always need to be satisfied through behavior. Marcus Aurelius once wrote, "You have the power not to have an opinion." In a world flooded with information and emotional triggers, the choice not to react immediately is a radical act of strength. You don't need to participate in every argument. You don't need to prove anything to someone unwilling to understand. You don't need to rush to defend your image. Composure is not weakness. It is the clearest display of refined inner strength. Calmness is a series of small, repeated decisions. When you choose silence instead of retorting, when you choose to observe rather than react, when you delay your response rather than rushing to a conclusion. Each time, you're laying the foundation of a person who cannot be easily provoked, swayed, or lost in temporary events. And it's precisely when you stay calm in the most uncomfortable situations that you begin to see what others can't, how they're being led by emotion, how they lose themselves without an inner anchor. And you realize, so long as your own mind stays steady, no one can use the external world to shake you. Practice this every day. Don't wait for crises in daily life, in traffic, when falsely accused, when someone breaks a promise. These small moments are your training ground for composure. And one day, in a situation where everyone else loses direction, you will be the only one who remains grounded. Not because you're better, but because you've trained yourself to respond with calmness when no one required you to. Calmness doesn't come with time. It comes with intentional choice made daily. You cannot control the world, but you can control yourself. And when you do, that's when you master the only thing that truly belongs to you, your inner freedom, which no one can take away. You cannot choose everything that happens to you, but you always have the power to choose how you respond. Between the event and your reaction, there is always a gap, and in that space lies all your power. A person with inner maturity is someone who knows how to remain in that space long enough, not to react instinctively, but to respond based on their core values. You are not the criticism someone throws at you. You are not the rain that ruins your plans. You are not the mistakes you made in the past. You are your response to all those things, and it is that response that defines you, not the circumstances. Someone who is insulted can choose wise silence. Someone who is betrayed can choose forgiveness and withdrawal in self-respect. Someone who stands amid injustice can choose to uphold dignity and fight with reason instead of violence. Each of those choices is a declaration. I will not let external events determine who I become. This world is chaotic. If you allow every outside force to control your emotions, you'll live like a rudderless boat, drifting with every current. But if you're aware enough to interrupt the automatic reaction, you are shifting from the role of victim to navigator, and this is not a feel-good theory to nod at. This is the art of living that every wise person practices. Viktor Frankl, a survivor of Nazi concentration camps, once said, "The last of human freedoms is to choose one's attitude in any given set of circumstances. If someone who was tortured and stripped of everything could still maintain clarity within, then you, in your daily challenges, can absolutely master your own reaction. All it takes is for you to stop identifying yourself with every fleeting emotion. You are not your anger, you are feeling anger. You are not your anxiety, you are experiencing anxious thoughts. You are not a failure, you've simply faced an undesired result. Your internal language matters deeply. It determines how you perceive yourself, and from that, how you respond. When you say, I'm just a hot-tempered person, you reinforce that identity. But when you say, I'm feeling angry, and I can choose how I respond, you open space for freedom. And only with that freedom in thought can you truly live on your own terms. Response is a trainable skill. At first you won't have full control, but every time you pause before replying to an angry message, every time you step outside to breathe instead of arguing to win, every time you write your emotions down instead of speaking words you can't take back, you are building an inner self that regulates instead of reacts. The deeper the person, the clearer they see. You don't need to express every feeling you have. Emotional discipline is not suppression. It is the ability to filter your response based on what is useful, not what satisfies a short-term ego need. Someone once asked me, so should I fake being strong? No. You don't need to fake anything. You just need to be honest with yourself about how you want to live. If you want to live according to the values of calmness, integrity, strength, then your responses must align with that, even in moments of chaos. No one expects you to be perfect, but if you don't start choosing different reactions, you'll never change your life's outcomes. Sometimes you'll see people react intensely, forcefully, and you might mistake that for strength, but the truth is, those who can't control their reactions are the ones being controlled. They let emotions act on their behalf. They let fear, anger, and pride make decisions instead of reason. And once calm returns, regret often follows. But those with high emotional intelligence understand, I can't undo an action, so I must be conscious before I take it. Anyone can train this. You don't need superior intelligence. You don't need to read 100 books. You just need to repeat one principle. The space between stimulus and response is where I choose who I become. Each time you respond better, you elevate yourself to a higher level of awareness. And when you do that often enough, calmness is no longer an effort. It becomes part of your identity. Start with the small things. When you're late, own it instead of blaming. When someone disrespects you, withdraw silently instead of retaliating. When you feel wronged, act based on facts and principles, not outrage. These reactions are not just ways to handle situations. They are declarations of the person you choose to be. And if you practice this long enough, you will realize something profound. You don't need your circumstances to change in order to be. You just need to choose differently. You are not what happens. You are how you respond to what happens. And in that response, you can choose maturity, steadiness, clarity. That is the ultimate power no one can take from you, unless you give it away. Breath is always there, yet you rarely pay attention to it. It doesn't need your control to continue. It flows silently, steadily, and patiently, like a lifelong companion. But precisely because it's always present, you often forget this truth. Breath is the gateway to the deepest stillness of the mind. Inner masters across East and West without prior agreement all converge on this one point. If you want to master your emotions, start by mastering your breath. When your mind is chaotic, your breath becomes short. When you're stressed, it's shallow and rapid. When you're angry, it's broken and erratic. The body never lies. It always reflects your internal state with unwavering honesty. And here's the fascinating part. You can't command your emotions to disappear instantly, but you can absolutely regulate your breath. And when you regulate your breath, you're sending a message back to your nervous system, all is well, no need to trigger emergency mode. This isn't just a neat trick, it's a highly sophisticated biological technique, now scientifically backed by neuroscience. In a stressed state, the sympathetic nervous system is activated, raising heart rate and stress hormones. But when you breathe slowly and deeply, especially when your exhale is longer than your inhale, you activate the parasympathetic system, guiding your body into a state of recovery, calm, and regeneration. A breathing cycle of 4 seconds in, 4 seconds hold, 6 seconds out, practice for just 5 minutes a day, can restore emotional control, lower cortisol, and enhance focus. But the power of breath doesn't stop at physiology. It reaches into a deeper layer, mindfulness. When you focus on your breath, you force yourself back into the present moment. You are no longer drifting into the past with regret nor spiraling into the future with worry. You're simply here, right now. Every inhale is an invitation to return. Every exhale is a chance to release what no longer serves you. You'll be surprised to discover the closer you get to your breath, the closer you get to yourself. You begin to notice unconscious impulses that normally control you. You see how anger is merely a wave arriving, and you don't need to ride it. You sense anxiety rising, but instead of drowning, you sit still, watching it pass like a cloud. And you understand, you are not the wave, You are the still lake that sees the wave without being swept away. In a noisy world where people chase endless methods to master life, breath is a simple yet incredibly powerful reminder. You don't need to control the world, you just need to start with yourself. And that beginning always lies in the breath. A person who returns to their breath before reacting is someone who knows how to pause and let wisdom speak. A person who regulates their breath in panic is someone refusing to let fear take the wheel. A person who uses breath to rebalance daily is someone who doesn't wait for peace from life because they carry peace within. You don't need to be a monk to breathe properly. You only need 3 minutes each morning before checking your phone, 3 minutes mid-workday when stress creeps in, 3 minutes before saying something important. Sit up straight, close your eyes, bring awareness to your breath. No need to adjust it, just observe, and then gently regulate it. Deep inhale, hold, long exhale. Each time you do this, you're training the muscles of self-control, presence, and silent power that no one can take away from you. Some may scoff. Breathing alone, what could that change? But they don't understand that every reaction, every habit, every personality trait begins with small choices repeated over time. And the choice to return to your breath is the choice to shift from reaction to intention, from unconsciousness to awareness, from instinctive living to conscious living. That is the foundation of all lasting transformation. You can attend countless skills workshops, read a library of books, listen to hours of motivational speeches, but if you've never truly observed your breath, then you haven't really begun the path of self-mastery. Breath is the bridge between body and mind. It's where you can listen to your inner world without distortion. It's the mirror that reflects whether you are rushing through life or living it deeply. And if you find yourself stressed, swept away, or out of control, don't blame yourself. Don't try to be strong. Just stop, close your eyes, return to your breath once, then again, then daily. You'll slowly realize it's not the world that's changed, it's the way you show up in it that has. Breath. Seemingly ordinary is the entrance to a mind that is aware, a heart that is at peace, and a soul that is steady. And from that foundation, you no longer need to control your emotions. You simply stop being controlled by them, because you found the most powerful anchor deep within yourself.